IELTS test day can be stressful, but don't worry because in this lesson, I'm going to show you 9 common test day problems and how to handle them so you can stay calm, think clearly, and do your best in the IELTS test. But before we start, let me tell you the best way to stay calm and confident on test day. Be prepared for everything. And that's exactly what my Band 7 Plus preparation course helps you do. It walks you through every question type, every skill, and every strategy you'll need. So when test day comes, you'll have done it all before. If you haven't joined yet, the link is in the description below, so go have a look. All right, let's get into the first problem you might face, which is you don't understand the question. Now, this will mainly happen in speaking, but it can also happen in reading and listening. So let's break it down. Let's start with speaking first. The first thing you need to know is it's not a problem. Don't stress. It happens to everyone, even native speakers. Sometimes they don't understand a question. Don't worry, it's not a problem. The issue is how you handle it, how you deal with it. Now, for part 1 of the speaking test, the examiner can explain the meaning of words and repeat a question. So if there's a word you don't understand, ask the examiner. If you didn't understand the whole question, ask the examiner to repeat the question. There's nothing wrong with it, and it's not going to lower your band score if you do it 1 or 2 times in part 1. Now for part 2, the examiner can also explain the meaning of words. So if there's a word you get in your question, you can ask the examiner and they'll give you a very short, quick explanation. And for part 3, the examiner can explain the meaning of words, repeat the question, and paraphrase. Now, if you don't know, paraphrase means to explain something in different words. So that's really, really useful to know. In part 3, the examiner can paraphrase. So if you don't understand something, what can you say? Well, it depends on what you want the examiner to do. If you want the examiner to repeat the whole question, you can say, "Could you repeat the question, please? Could you say that one more time? I didn't catch that. Could you say that again?" Now, if you don't understand the meaning of something, you can use these phrases. Could you explain what word means? For example, could you explain what encyclopedia means? Sorry, what does word mean? Could you ask the question in a different way? Now, obviously, you'll use this one when you want the examiner to explain the question with different words. And finally, I don't understand, could you rephrase the question? To rephrase something means to ask it in a different way. Now, in regards to reading and listening, there are a few different things you can do. The first thing you can do is just ignore the word and pretend it's not there. Sometimes big, advanced words don't really matter. Take, for example, this sentence. What caused the drastic decline in the bee population? Let's pretend you don't know the meaning of drastic. Well, just ignore it. What caused the decline in the bee population? Well, it still has a similar meaning. It's asking what caused the decrease or the fewer numbers in the bee population. Now, when it comes to reading, you can always skip the question and just come back later if you don't know a word in the question or if you don't know what you've read in the passage. If you manage your time well, you should have a little bit of time left at the end of the test when you can, come back and see if you can guess the meaning or just guess the answer. And that leads us to the last solution, which is just guess the meaning. A lot of the time, if you look around words you don't know, you'll be able to guess the meaning. So for example, if you look at this example here, it says she felt exhausted after running the marathon and needed to rest immediately. Just pretend you don't know what exhausted means. Well, if you look at the last bit, it says she needed to rest. Well, if someone needs to rest, they're probably tired. They probably don't have any energy left. And that's exactly what exhausted means. All right, let's move on to number 2, which is running out of time. Something that I always talk about is time management and speed. This is because even if you have the best English in the world, if you don't finish all of the tests, well, you're not going to get the highest band score possible. Because of that, you need to do practice tests under real timing. This is going to get you familiar with how quickly you need to work. And a lot of students don't realize how quickly they do need to actually do the test. You don't have a lot of time, okay? You've got to work quickly. But in saying that, yes, you do have to work quickly, but at the same time, you still need to work accurately and produce work of a high quality. Now, another thing that's important, and it's going to prevent you from having this problem in the real test, is just knowing some basic time management rules for each part or each section of the IELTS test. So let's take reading, for example. Here's a very basic time management strategy. 15 minutes for passage 1, 20 for passage 2, and 25 minutes for passage 3. Now, this is just a basic plan. You don't always have to follow this. Sometimes one passage might take you a little bit more or a little bit less. It's just giving you an idea of a basic time management strategy. Now, for writing, you should spend around 20 minutes on part 1 and then 40 minutes for part 2. And remember that part 2 is worth more than part 1 in the writing test. Part 2 accounts for 66% of your overall writing score, whereas part 1 only accounts for 33%. Okay, so make sure you finish part 2 because part 2 is worth more. But in saying that, you obviously need to finish both parts to get the highest score. So make sure time management and speed, make sure these things are a big part of your IELTS preparation because it's going to make the real test much easier. Now, if you do run out of time in the real test, well, there's nothing you can do. Just do your best. Let's move on to number 3, which is you miss an answer in listening. It happens to every IELTS student. You listen really, really hard, but sometimes you miss an answer. Well, if that happens, don't worry. What you need to do is move on to the next question because you should always be listening for 2 or more questions at one time. What I mean by that is, let's pretend that these are the first 2 listening questions. Well, you should be listening for both questions just in case you miss an answer. So for example, if you look at number 1, it says, what problem did David have? Well, you should be listening for a problem. You should be listening for that topic or that thing. And number 2 says, what did David and Sarah find surprising about the models? Well, you need to be thinking about that second question as well. So you need to be listening for something surprising, just in case you miss number 1, which is about a problem. So let's pretend you miss the answer for number 1. Well, it doesn't matter because you are ready for question 2. Okay, you're ready. You know the topic for question 2. And by the way, if you do get questions like this and you just simply have to choose a letter, never leave them blank. Just answer or guess the answer, because you don't lose any marks if you get it wrong. And what I mean by that is your score doesn't go down by 1 point if you get an answer wrong. Number 4, your mind goes blank in the speaking test, normally because you're nervous or you don't have any ideas. Sometimes you might get a really difficult question that you've never thought of before. Well, don't panic. Here's what you need to do. Take a breath and use a filler phrase. Now, a filler phrase is a short expression people use in conversation to fill a pause when they think or plan what to say next. So, for example, well is a very common one. Let me see is another one. or you know is another one. Now, these phrases don't really have any meaning. They just give you a little bit of time to think. The next thing you can do is to just paraphrase the question to give yourself time. So if the question is something like, what is your favorite band? Well, you could say something like, well, good question. The band I'm most into would have to be dot, dot, dot. So you're just repeating the question just to give yourself a little bit of time. Now, most of the time, you'll probably use this strategy in speaking part 3, because that's when the questions get a bit more difficult, whereas in part 1, they're pretty simple. Now, if you don't know what to say, just use your own experience. Talk about your opinion or just guess. The most important thing is that you say something. It doesn't really matter what you say. What's more important is that you say something. You use good vocabulary, you use good grammar, you have good pronunciation. That's more important. Now, if you don't know, if you just have no idea about that topic, well, just say that. Just say, I don't know, and I haven't had any experience, or I'm not an expert in this topic, and then keep going. Okay, you can't just say I don't know and then stop. Say I don't know, say I don't have any experience in this, and then keep going. Say something. Now, in the worst case scenario, this is a last resort. This is the very last option. Just say you don't know what to say and ask to move to the next question. But remember, this is the very, very, very last option. This is much better than just sitting there and saying nothing. Because as an examiner, I've seen many students who get a difficult question and they just sit there. They don't say anything. So it's better to say something to show that you have some English rather than just sitting there saying nothing. Now, like I said, you should always do your best to answer the question, but if you don't know what to say to answer the question, always try and do it like a native speaker would. And like I said before, a native speaker wouldn't just sit there and say nothing, they would say something. Number 5, you can't think of any ideas for writing task 2. There are many different question types in the writing test, including opinion, agree or disagree, discuss and give your opinion, causes, effects, solutions, advantages, disadvantages, 2-part questions, and listing questions. Now, each of these question types requires a different strategy, but for every question, you need to think of ideas. And if you can't think of anything, you need to know that you don't need to think of unique ideas. You don't need to think of really special ideas. Simple ideas are fine. And that's what I think a lot of students have problems with. They think that their ideas need to be amazing and very unique and very special, but this is not true. That is a misconception. Simple ideas are fine. Now, to get your mind going, to get your brain thinking, you can always ask yourself the question in simple English. So for example, if the topic is about pollution in cities, well, ask yourself, why is there pollution in cities? And just think about it. Think about why there's pollution and write down whatever comes into your mind. You can also ask yourself WH questions: who, what, when, where, why, or how. These are great questions. They're very simple questions, but they're going to get you thinking and they're going to get you to think of some ideas. Another thing you can do is just use your own experience. Talk about what you've seen, talk about what you've experienced, but make sure you talk in general, because this allows you to use better language. So for example, instead of just saying, I think, well, you could say, it can be seen that, This is much more professional. And finally, the last thing to mention is that the most important thing is support. And if you don't know, support means giving more information about your main ideas. If you have a look at the IELTS band descriptors, for a band 7 in task response, it says your main ideas are extended and supported. So that means you need to give more information about your main ideas rather than just listing them. Number 6, you get nervous and can't focus. It's totally normal to feel nervous when you're doing your IELTS test, but the best way to reduce your nerves is preparation. You need to be prepared for every single little thing that might happen in the real test. For example, you need to be prepared for all question types in writing task 2. What to do if you don't know a word in the speaking test. How to write an introduction. How to write an answer for a map. What you need to do to get your target score. How to develop ideas. How long to speak for in part 1, 2, and 3 of the speaking test. So you need to know all of these things if you want to get the best band score possible. Now, knowing all of these things is going to help to reduce your nerves, but of course you still might feel nervous. So if you do, you need to make sure that you have practiced doing real tests under real timed conditions. This is going to prepare you for the real test, so nothing surprises you, whether that's different question types or just the time that you have to complete each section. Now, don't worry about your overall score, okay? You shouldn't be thinking about that in the test. You should just be thinking about one question at a time. Make sure you do your best for every question, and that's going to give you the best chance of getting a high overall score for the whole IELTS test. Make sure you relax, make sure you breathe, okay? Just do your best. There's nothing else you can do apart from preparing and doing your best. It happens to many students. They have to take the test twice, so don't worry if that's you. It's not the end of the world. It happens to some students. They have to do the test twice. Now, in speaking, please remember that the examiner is not your enemy, okay? He's not out there to hurt you. He's not out there to give you a low score. So just relax in the speaking test. Talk to the examiner like he or she is a normal person. Say hello, say thank you, be polite. Okay, just treat them like a normal person. And finally, the last thing you need to think about is your mindset. When it comes to your mindset for IELTS, remember that perfection is not needed. You're not trying to get a band 9, okay? So you don't need to be perfect. If you're just trying to get a band 7, well, it's totally fine to make some mistakes here and there, and you can still get a band 7 or even a band 8. Number 7, you forget a word in the speaking test. It happens to everybody, even native speakers. Sometimes you just forget a word, and that's fine. It's totally natural. It's how you handle this situation which makes a difference. Because in the speaking band descriptors, for a band 7 in lexical resource, which just means vocabulary, in the yellow, you can see it says effective use of paraphrase as required. So that simply means if you can't think of a word, you need to be able to explain it in a different way. And if you can't, well, that's showing that you do not have the ability to paraphrase, and you probably won't get a band 7. So practice your paraphrasing. It's very, very important. So if you can't think of a word and then you can't paraphrase as well, that's a big problem because it shows you cannot paraphrase. And like we just saw, that is a requirement for band 7. So if you do forget a word, okay, just do your best to paraphrase it or explain it in different words. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just make sure you try and explain it in the best way that you can. Keep speaking, okay? Fluency is much more important than perfection. Like we talked about just before, okay, you're probably not aiming for a band 9, so just keep speaking. It's more important than being perfect. Now, when you are paraphrasing, you can just use simple words to explain what you mean. You don't have to use amazing band 9 perfect vocabulary. Just show to the examiner that you can explain things in different ways, that you have a good vocabulary, that you have enough vocabulary to explain your thoughts or your ideas. Another thing you can do is just use natural fillers. So if you can't think of anything, you can say, oh, what's the word? What's it called? And then keep speaking. Like I said before, it's totally normal. It happens to everyone, even native speakers. Sometimes people forget words. Number 8, you make a mistake in the speaking test. Students ask me this all the time. What happens if I make a mistake in the speaking test? Well, if you make one mistake, the answer is nothing. Because in the band descriptors, it says a candidate will be rated on their average performance across all parts of the test. Their average performance. Let's take vocabulary, for example. If most of the time you use good vocabulary and you don't make mistakes, then one mistake won't make a difference. However, if you always make mistakes, then this is obviously, well, it may stop you from getting a high band score. So if you make a mistake or 2 mistakes, don't worry. It's not the end of the world. You don't have to be perfect because, like I've said before, you're probably not trying to get a band 9. Even for a band 7 in grammatical range and accuracy, it says error-free sentences are frequent. And then it says a few basic errors persist. So even for band 7, it says you can have a few basic errors. So don't stress, don't worry too much. It's okay if you make a few basic errors, you can still get a band 7. But what should you do if you do make a mistake? Well, it's pretty simple. Just correct yourself if you realize. But obviously, if you don't realize, well, you won't be able to correct yourself. Just keep talking. So in summary, don't worry if you make a mistake. The examiner is going to look at your whole speaking test or your whole writing test when deciding your score, not just one part. Number 9, something unexpected happens. Even if you prepare for everything, something might happen that you just don't expect, whether that's having no ideas, forgetting some vocabulary, not understanding a question, not knowing how to answer a question type, the examiner asks you a hard question, or even having a technical issue if you're doing the computer version of IELTS. So what should you do in this situation if something unexpected happens? Well, just like normal, take a breath, just relax and think. Okay, there might be a very simple solution to the issue. If it's for reading, listening, or writing, and it's a technical issue, if you're doing the computer-based version of IELTS, well, obviously ask for help from the invigilator and just listen to their instructions. Now, if it's a serious issue, your equipment, if there's a, loud noise or whatever, obviously report it straight away. Don't just sit there and do nothing. And don't panic, okay? Just keep going. Remember, you're not trying to get a band 9, most likely. So if there is something unexpected, just do your best, think about it, and just do the best you can in the moment. And something to know is there's a 99.99% chance that there will be no issues. I know, I've talked to hundreds, if not thousands of students who have done IELTS before, and no one has ever told me that they've had a major issue. So don't worry, you're probably not going to have any problems or any issues. Now, let me leave you with one last tip. The students who do the best are the ones who have prepared and the ones who do not panic, okay? Just relax, just do your best, and I'm sure you'll be fine. But if you do want to know how to prepare for IELTS, make sure you check out this video right here. Thanks for watching. I really hope that was helpful, and good luck with your studies.